What's up, everybody? Welcome to a Friday edition of The Sweat. It's getaway day, which means we're going to talk about everything. I mean, everything. There's going to be basketball playoffs, hockey playoffs. We'll do horse racing. We'll do golf. We'll do NASCAR. We'll do football. We'll do USFL. You name it. We're going to cover it at some point over the course of the next hour, but it all begins on the diamond. Major League Baseball. I am Adam Kaufman, joined here by Eric Halterman, Gary and Thorne. We have got ourselves a 13-game main slate tonight, gentlemen. It's very good to see you. We're going to begin a little MLB batting practice. And first off, Gary, let's start with you here. Best DFS sportsbook plays for tonight's slate across the way, obviously, is our main focus. So which pitcher has your favorite matchup tonight for DFS? Is it one of the two very chalky New Yorkers?
Well, that's the thing that I think we have to talk about is it would be in a vacuum, although it seems like both of these games are going to get rained out. I think that Garrett Cole would be the guy tonight, considering one, you never see Garrett Cole below 10K, and two, he hasn't given up an earned run in his last two starts, and there is no team in baseball worse against right-handed pitching statistically than the Texas Rangers. But I don't think this game gets played. So you're going to have to keep an eye on both the Mets game and the Yankees game, obviously, but I'm kind of writing them off in my head already. And that would then lead me on a matchup basis anyway to probably take a serious look at Nathan Invaldi. He's been not the problem so far this season for the Red Sox. He's been quite good. Has had some issues with the home run ball, but that's really it. Where the White Sox have just been decimated by injuries yet again. They put Andrew Vaughn on the IL. Yesterday, they're obviously without Eloy Jimenez right now. They've been terrible too against right-handed pitchers. Just a 74 WRC plus so far this season within that split. So I think Eovaldi's in a really nice spot tonight. Again, if you do have to pivot away from the New York guys because they're underwater.
All right. Well, RotoWire's Mr. Halterman. Suppose you do get a rain out for one of those New York guys. You want to go to Eovaldi, like Arian mentioned. There are other guys who are expect to be owned in, say, 15, 18% plus of lineups, whether that's a Shane Bieber, a Yu Darvish. Who stands out?
Yeah, I do like paying all the way up for Kevin Gausman at 10,000, although he is a rain risk. It seems like, as of this morning, less rain risk there than on the East Coast, but still at least a moderate amount, so you want to check that. But if he is in the lineup, we're talking about a guy who has 41 strikeouts against 0 walks to start the season. Last I checked, that was pretty good. That'll lead to a 2.27 ERA. That is considered a underachievement by over a run and a half, according to FIP, which of course is depends heavily on strikeouts and walks. He's got a FIP of 0.51, which is quite good, I would say, if he can keep that up. We saw Corbin Burns with a similarly dominant start, I think, last year, where his FIP was just off the charts in a similar direction. So striking out over a third of opposing batters while walking none, you're not going to get much better than that. He is facing a Cleveland team that's gotten off to a very hot start at the plate, although I think if you look at the overall talent there, it's not a lineup that you'd expect to be quite where it is going forward. So I think given how hot Gausman's been, as long as the game goes forward, he's the high-priced ace that I'm most attracted to.
Let's stay with you, Eric, then. If we're looking for an infielder who's a must roster tonight across this slate, and again, with 26 teams playing on that slate, you got a lot of options. I could look to my bias, which isn't even far-fetched this time around. Rafael Devers, really good spot. Someone like Jose Altuve, really good spot. Who do you like?
The guy I like the most, I think, is Jared Walsh at 3,700. It's a nice mid-priced option that should let you fit in some of those more expensive guys. Walsh hasn't quite duplicated his numbers from last year when he hit 277 with 29 homers. He's hitting just 247 this year, although, again, considering the offensive environment is down, we have to mentally adjust all these mediocre seeming performances up a bit. 247 with 4 homers so far this year. He's actually cut his strikeout rate by 2 points to 24%. His barrel rate is down, but by less than a percentage point. So I think it's more or less the same Jared Walsh, who I think would have been going for more than 4,000 in the past, especially against Yoan Adon, who I'm not entirely sure why he's in the Nationals rotation. Didn't necessarily have a lot of upper minors experience, and he looks like it so far. 7.33 ERA this season, striking out under 19% of opposing batters walking almost 12%. So it's a good matchup and a great price for a guy who I think should be a very solid hitter going forward.
What do you say, Gary?
Yeah, I'm looking in the exact same spot. And obviously Walsh is the much more economical way to attack this. But the nice thing about everyone's favorite first baseman in DFS that never plays first base, Shohei Ohtani, also has outfield eligibility. So you can get him and Jared Walsh into the same lineup. And you want to do that against a Don who has just not been able to get out left-handed batters so far this season. It pains me to say this. This is a man who almost got the Jays into the playoffs last year in game 162, but he's looked terrible so far this season. He has the highest expected WOBA of any pitcher who's faced at least 100 batters so far this season at 444. Left-handed batters in particular have a 313 batting average and a 414 WOBA against him across his 5 starts. He's been particularly bad when facing anyone not named the Arizona Diamondbacks, which is understandable. That was his only quality outing of the season. I just think you should load up on the Angels tonight. And if you can do so with specifically the left-handed hitters, like an Ohtani, like a Walsh, that's probably the best direction to go.
Gary, and if we're looking for an outfielder who could put up big fantasy numbers tonight, obviously you have a ton to choose from. You know, I'm looking here at some guys that are in good spots. Byron Buxton's, high on that list. You could look at Cedric Mullins. Dalton Varsho is going to be incredibly popular. Aaron Judge, obviously. Who do you like?
I'm going to go with Kyle Tucker, who is now entering, I believe, like month 7 or 8 of his eternal struggle with expected WOBA versus actual statistics. Kyle Tucker is just one of the best hitters in baseball. So he is underpriced virtually on every slate. He's just $4,400 tonight. He's never doing as well as his advanced numbers say he's going to do, which has only been worse in 2022 when everyone's actual numbers are worse than their expected numbers because the baseball is dead. But he's got a 425 expected WOBA. That's elite. And his last 13 games, he's really starting to come around. In that 13 game span, a 221 WRC plus. He's hitting above 400. The balls are just finally finding some grass, which has been really nice for Kyle Tucker. And we've got Bo Brisky making his 3rd career start for the Tigers tonight. He's pitched 10 innings, given up 5 barrels, walked 4 guys, and given up 3 home runs. He's just not a guy who should be pitching at the major league level right now. So I think the Astros in general are in a really nice spot, but an opposite hand matchup like this for Tucker is one that you should really take advantage of.
Garen, I know in baseball, there are so many stats and metrics that we can track. Is that how it goes? Is it great, good, average, bad, eternal struggle?
Yeah.
Do we find that on the list?
Yeah.
What do you say here, Eric?
As far as eternal struggle or as far as
you could focus on outfielders who are going to put up big nights, but if you want to weigh in on eternal struggle, I won't stop you.
I think poetry segment comes later, so we'll move to outfield here.
It's part of our potpourri.
Yeah, exactly. Let's go Juan Soto at 5,000. Whenever I can talk about Juan Soto, I'm a happy guy. So let's do that today. He's the 12th most expensive outfielder on this slate at 5,000, cheaper than the likes of Taylor Ward and Connor Joe, who are having great seasons, but they're also not named Juan Soto. The fear with Juan Soto for fantasy purposes is that he might just get walked every time he comes to the plate. Although he has started heating up in terms of, doing the things that you care even more about for fantasy purposes. He's got 3 homers in his last 6 games. And he'll have the platoon advantage here against Jaime Barria, who doesn't walk guys for his career, just 7.7% walk rate this year, just 2.1%. So if he comes into the zone, which he has been doing this year, Soto is as capable as anybody at crushing it. He's still doing his same Juan Soto thing where he's walking more than he strikes out, but he's making good contact as well, hitting 271, although his expected batting average, according to StatCast, is all the way up at 298. He's the same Juan Soto that we see pretty much every year, it seems like, and he's got a good matchup here. So if I can get him for less than I can get some of this year's hot starts, he's definitely somebody I'm interested in.
Eric, if we're looking for the best value option available tonight, is there a better option than KC outfielder Edward Olivares? Do you like someone better than him?
Well, I do like Kansas City here against Jordan Lyles. I think that's the kind of matchup we should be going for. But I'm looking at MJ Melendez at 2,200 if he plays. He's the young catching prospect who's come up, just played 2 games, but he's supposed to have an excellent bat. We're not sure exactly how often he's going to be in the lineup, given that Salvador Perez is there, although both of them are probably bat first kind of guys, so expect plenty of DH for both of them. He's a guy who's supposed to have a ton of raw power. Last year at the AAA level, hit 293, 413, 620 in 44 games with 13 homers. Really broke out at AA as well, 28 homers in 79 games. Wasn't actually doing well at the AAA level this season, but the team decided they needed him. If he's in the lineup, I think he's a lot better than 2,200 at the catcher position.
Darian, who's your value?
Yeah, it's probably a bit of a cop-out, but I'm just going to go with Royce Lewis, who we've already been told will be in the lineup tonight. Before we came on air, we saw that Carlos Correa was placed on the injured list. The Twins need this guy right now, and because he is making his MLB debut, as is often the case, he is just $2,000. He's the bare minimum on DraftKings tonight. Former number 1 overall pick in 2017, was really hitting the baseball well in AAA. This season, over 100 plate appearances, a 164 WRC plus. It's hard to say exactly where he's going to end up in the Twins lineup, but considering the amount of injuries they have right now, I feel like he's going to be in at least the top 2/3. Maybe, I mean, if not even just taking over like the number 2 spot for Correa. So, obviously wait and see where he ends up in that Twins lineup, and that can kind of dictate how much exposure you're getting to a guy like Royce Lewis, but $2,000 for someone with his offensive potential in a matchup against Zach Logue as well, who is, I mean, literally a AAA level pitcher. He's getting the call up tonight because the Athletics just need someone. I think it's a really nice spot.
Gary, it's time for a slate approved pick. So with that, your absolute favorite bet on the DK Sportsbook.
So this one's tough. I agree with Eric. I think that Kevin Gausman is probably having the best season of any pitcher so far in baseball, but at the same time, I'm drawn towards the Guardians at plus 125 as a home underdog. I think this is basically a toss-up game. I know Shane Bieber has lost a couple ticks on the old fastball velocity, but he's still been highly effective so far this season. He's got an ERA under 3 and a FIP just slightly above 3. He's not been bad. He's given up some barrels, but honestly, at this point, barrels don't quite mean the same thing they meant last season. So if I'm looking at this matchup, I would lean pitching-wise towards Toronto. But the Jays lineup has been underwhelming so far this season, especially the last couple of weeks. Maybe they get Teoscar Hernandez back tonight. That's still unclear. But the Guardians, I would also agree with Eric's assessment of the Guardians that they are not this type of lineup. But if you just want to go by the raw statistics, they are first in batting average, first in WOBA, and first in WRC plus against right-handed pitching so far this season. I'm just intrigued by that combination with Shane Bieber as an underdog at home. I think it all kind of stacks together to make me want to sprinkle there.
Eric, what do you got?
I'm looking at the Diamondbacks at home over the Rockies. Minus 145 isn't a great deal, but I think it's good enough, especially because the Rockies offense on the road is really a matchup that you want to pick on. The ball just moves differently at elevation versus outside of Coors Field. And especially for the first game of a road trip like we have here, you want to pick on these Rockies hitters when they maybe are, just their timing's off a tiny bit on those breaking balls. Also, the Diamondbacks will get Meryl Kelly, who I think has been one of the more interesting stories of the season so far. Added a bit of velocity, although it did come down a tiny bit, I think, in his last start. But he's been up there overall and has a 1.27 ERA on the season with a 2.11 FIP. His strikeout rate is up close to league average, and he's still not walking guys and has a pretty decent ground ball rate. This is a guy who was about as bland as it gets prior to this season. To see him take the next step at this age is going to be an interesting thing to follow, how well he can keep that up. Chad Kuhl on the other side actually has a 1.90 ERA himself, although his peripherals across the board are a tick or two worse than Kelly's. So I think the Diamondbacks have the advantage both on the mound and in the lineup, even though it's not much of a lineup there. But I still think, given that first game of the road trip for the Rockies, minus 145 is good enough to make this interesting.
All right, Eric Halterman from RotoWire, Gary and Thorne, DraftKings contributor. You guys, I don't know what you got going on the rest of the day, but you can at least cross this show off your to-do list. We'll talk to you later. Have a good weekend. The sweat continues right after this. Playoff hoops on the way. The Sweat for the NBA shoot-around, joined here by Jeff Pratt, Matt Meiselman, a couple of DK contributors, and let's get into all things NBA, boys, with a couple of game threes on the hardwood tonight. Matt, we'll start with you here. We're looking at DFS to begin things. We'll get to the DraftKings Sportsbook. Your absolute must-roster guys tonight, who are they?
So I'm not quite sure if I have one yet, and there's going to be a little bit of uncertainty for me throughout this segment because we don't know for sure that Joel Embiid is going to be out. If he's out, then we really, it's a decision between two players at the high end, James Harden, Luka Doncic, and I'll go with Luka. Like, both of these guys are going to be really popular, and I think in reality, both of them, despite being expensive, are actually really underpriced. Like, Luka is so much better than the other players at the high end that even a bad game for him is mid 50s in fantasy points. And just given like the lack of great options on these playoff slates, I almost think you have to play Luka. The conversation changes a little bit if you're in big tournaments, big GPPs, you want some leverage, all that sort of stuff. But Luka's a cash game lock, and I think even for tournaments, you probably just play him there too.
All right, so Jeff, if we're to assume that Joel Embiid won't play, though, are you going to make the counterpoint for James Harden?
I'm not. And thank you, Matt, for taking by far the best player on the slate and leaving me to talk about someone much worse. I'll go with Jimmy Butler, who has really stepped up his game in the playoffs. Heading into the postseason, I was concerned about how Miami's offense matched up with the rest of the East. They only had two guys averaging over 20 points per game, and both of them were barely clearing 20 in Jimmy Butler and Tyler Hero. That being said, their defense has been so dominant, it hasn't really mattered. They've held opponents under 100 points 4 times already through 7 games in the postseason, and Butler has been strong, at least strong enough offensively to carry them on that side of the ball. He scored 20 or more points in all but 1 games throughout the playoffs, and he's coming off a huge 22-point, 11 assist, and 6 rebound performance in game 2 versus Philly. The Sixers just don't have an answer for him, and I expect that trend to continue tonight.
Well, let's talk a little value then, Jeff. Truthfully, I mean, if I'm looking at it, and I know you guys are the analysts, obviously, but it feels like we've already talked about the best value options. They just happen to be incredibly high priced because they're in great spots, and Luka Doncic and James Harden. So how about someone like Tobias Harris? You could look at Dorian Finney-Smith for a bounce back. Who's got your attention here?
I'm going a little bit lower in the price range. Anytime you can get consistent 20-ish fantasy point production out of a player who's priced under 5K, it's a steal. And that's exactly the case with Maxi Cleba, who comes in at 4,400. You look at Kleba's stat line and nothing really pops out, but he does a little bit of everything, and he's racked up 18 plus DK fantasy points in 3 straight contests. His usage rate has also seen a significant bump in 2 of those contests. The Mavs are looking for help offensively besides Luka Doncic, and Kleba has shown that he can handle some of that burden. There aren't a ton of great value plays on tonight's slate, but he's definitely one of them. And quickly on the other side of that matchup, I also think Jay Crowder is a solid play at 5K. He scored 27 plus DK fantasy points in both games of this series, and he's shooting 60% from 3 over those 2 contests as well. We know what type of role Crowder is going to play. If he's making his shots, the production will be there.
Something Jeff just said, very true. There are not a lot of great value directions to go in here tonight. So which way are you looking?
Yeah, so I guess I'll give like the GPP tournament pivot off of what I guess will kind of be the chalk, which is playing Luka or Harden or both, and then trying to fit in some cheaper guys. And that's just playing Jalen Brunson instead of Luka, and then maybe using some mid-range players. So I don't know that I would necessarily call Brunson a value play. I don't think he's underpriced really, but at $6,400, he's cheap enough that playing him instead of Doncic and hoping for foul trouble, hoping for a blowout, hoping for just a bad game. Luka does have a propensity for technicals. Maybe if they don't play well tonight, there is a chance that he just gets really frustrated. But Brunson also just hasn't played well in the last couple of games. He hasn't played well in this series, and I don't think anyone's going to be using him. Also, he just doesn't really fit in the lineup construction where you need cheaper players to fit around these studs. And I guess we'll see if people actually do want to play James Harden, but he's only 9K. So my hunch is that there's a lot of stars and scrubs lineups. And if you play someone in the mid-range like Brunson, there's a huge amount of leverage to be had there. Maybe Brunson finally gets it back together. He's not playing the Jazz anymore, but I do think that he has a good game in him.
Someone who's not cheap, you could make a case Devin Booker's another guy, potentially value-wise. But, Matt, let's go to the DraftKings Sportsbook side of things. You have a favorite player prop tonight?
So I don't know if Embiid's going to play, but I'll just tell you what I'm going to be doing. I'm going to be staring at this injury update potentially for the entire day. Like, I'm just waiting for it. And if Embiid, refresh. It's more like, all the devices. Got to get refresh everywhere. But basically, if Embiid does play, the points props on all of the Sixers starters are way too high. 21.5 for Harden, 22.5 for Maxi. I think it's 19.5, maybe 18.5 now for Harris. The under on all of those is good if Embiid's in the lineup. So that's where I'm looking. I don't even know that there's one that I would say is my favorite. I think there's insane value on all three of those unders if Embiid ends up starting. I don't really know if I like too many props today if Embiid isn't playing. I think everything's kind of just fair at this point. We kind of know how these series are, assuming that Embiid's not playing. But if he's in, everything changes. So I think that's where the best potential value is. And you just have to wait to see if they announce something.
Jeff, you want to go back to your guy, Kleber?
I do not. I've actually done a complete 180 on this specific prop because for a significant stretch of the regular season, Jimmy Butler looked like the most passive superstar of all time. He would just show up and go through the motions on the offensive side of the ball. Now, every time he steps on the floor, he's locked in. He takes initiative on offense, and that's why I'm confident that he'll go over 34.5 points, rebounds, and assists in Game 3 versus Philly. He's cleared that number pretty comfortably in 4 of his last 5 games and has shown real aggressiveness on the boards, grabbing 9 or more on a regular basis recently, which is well above his season average. As I said before, the Sixers just don't have an answer for Butler, so he should stay hot tonight. Now, obviously, things can change if Embiid is back in the lineup, but as of right now, he's ruled out, so you have to go with what we know right now.
Well, again, what we know on the DraftKings Sportsbook, Jeff, is that both these games are basically a pick'em. So ultimately, who do you like? Is it going to be 3-0 in one or both these series at the end of the night, or are we going to cut a series deficit in half?
I think we'll cut one series deficit in half here. We've seen absolutely nothing to suggest that Philly can win this game without Joel Embiid. DeAndre Jordan's played double-digit minutes in both matchups in this series, and that just can't happen again if the Sixers want to win. James Harden
disagrees.
Yeah. I know Doc Rivers does disagree. So, hey, there's a reason he's coaching the Sixers and I'm not, but definitely questionable decision-making there. James Harden just doesn't look like James Harden right now. It looks like Philly knows they can't win without Embiid, and the Heat also know that. Now Embiid's currently listed out, as we've talked about multiple times here in this segment. He might be able to play. We're still waiting on that final update. But even if he is, it sounds like he's still really banged up. So I think Miami is going to win that one regardless. Now, looking over the Mavs-Suns series, it's definitely tighter. As we know, if there's a game teams steal in a series where they're the worst side, it's typically Game 3 when they're playing in front of their home crowd for the first time. We know we're going to get 30-plus from Luka. It's all about if other players can't step up. I like to think someone will, and that Dallas can make this a somewhat competitive series with a win tonight.
Man, I can't believe Embiid might not play through a fractured orbital. What a baby. Unreal.
I'd be out there with that injury for sure.
You wouldn't see me for a month and a half.
Let's just sign you up 10-day right now.
That's right. All right. Which way are these games going to go tonight?
So I think Dallas-Phoenix is a true coin flip. So I really don't have anything compelling to say there. I think Dallas can do it, but I think it'll be a close game. I think that spread's just right. But I actually like Philly in all scenarios. It's just a matter of how much. And then it also is dependent on if Kyle Lowry plays. We don't know that yet either, but I think here's what I expect to happen for the two scenarios. If Embiid gets ruled out, Philly's going to be up to like plus 4.5 or 5 once he's really ruled out, not just listed out. And at that point, I think that's too many points on the Philly side. I don't think the Heat are that great of a team. I think the Sixers obviously have their issues if Embiid's not playing, but Game 3s are the ones where home teams, are going to have a little bit more of a motivational edge. Once it gets to 3-0, assuming Embiid's still out there, I think that's where they kind of give up. But in this game, I do think that they can give it a real shot if Embiid's not playing. And then if Embiid is playing, I think Philly deserves to be like -3 or even -4 in this game. And it would probably be even higher if Embiid were fully healthy. Like, that's my assumption with Embiid partially healthy. Because again, I think Philly is better than Miami if both teams were 100%. So Embiid playing at like 70% health, I think that actually makes this a pretty close matchup. You get the home court advantage. And I think Philly wins, like, I don't know if they win comfortably. Nothing's comfortable for them, but I would think they deserve to be 3 or 4 point favorites in the scenario where Joel Embiid is out there. And they're currently 3 or 4 point underdogs. So this is a massive, massive value if Embiid does ultimately get upgraded, because what we saw yesterday is that just because Embiid was listed out, the line went from around pick'em to Heat -3. So it's already priced in that he's not going to play. And if he does wind up playing, it's as if the odds makers aren't expecting it. So we could see this line shift quite a bit.
Man, I just hope you're not glued on, just device. Look, a little update on every little thing all day long. We need the news earlier so that you can enjoy some of the sun.
No, that's okay. We don't need. I'll do that tomorrow or the weekend. Today is just stare at the Embiid news day. That's all that's going on.
Boys, enjoy the 2-gamer tonight. Thanks for hopping on with us. When we come back, Puck Talk with Paul Bruno. That's next. Back here on the Sweat, just about halfway home. And as I said just prior to our break, it's now, technically it's the NHL opening faceoff, but I prefer to call it Puck Talk with Paul Bruno, joining us here from RotoWire. Great to see you again, Paul. And 3 series evened up, 1 game each. Of course, Colorado, a game 2 win in overtime, took a 2-0 series lead. That was exciting. Cale Makar, the hero there. Your biggest takeaway from the games last night?
Well, there were a couple of them. You know what? Through the first 4 nights of playoffs, we've seen 4 series tied at 1 game apiece, actually 6 games tied at 1 game apiece, which is a testament to the quality of and narrow spread between top and bottom. But the biggest takeaway for me last night was that the Dallas club was able to steal a game from Calgary right in Cowtown. 2-0 shutout win, that low-scoring affair, typical of the DNA of both clubs, but surprising that Dallas was able to pull this off. And how about Nashville holding the Avs to 1 goal in regulation with a third-string goalie on their way to a narrow 2-1 overtime loss? That was a bit of a surprise, too.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun, obviously. I mean, close. You can't beat the Stanley Cup playoffs, Paul, is what it comes down to. Tightly contested games. Some of them go all night long. It's an absolute blast. Tonight, we want to look at the DFS side of things first. We'll get to the DK Sportsbook, obviously. Top price forward, wing, or center. Who's putting up the most fantasy points tonight just to start things off, and then we'll keep going from there.
You know what? The Oilers are on a 7-game playoff losing streak dating back a couple of seasons. You have to think that McDavid is going to go off one of these nights like he's done so many times all season long. But even if you're a little wary of spending up to his price tag, you can even save $1,000 and get his longtime running mate Draisaitl for $1,000 less. If you believe the Oilers are going to roll, he's going to be involved in the scoring, and we know that goal scoring pays off much more than passing and setting up goals and with assists on the DK ledger. So Draisaitl could be an even better pick here. And if you're looking elsewhere, I think the Hurricanes have roasted the Bruins in all 5 games they've played this season. The Bees just can't seem to contain the Carolina offense, and that begins with Sebastian Aho, their top line center, and yet he's priced at only $6,300. That smells to me like a bargain tonight.
Goalie change for Boston tonight, Jeremy Swayman. We'll see if that makes any sort of difference. But over the course of the year, considering the Bees have not led in any of the 5 matchups with the Hurricanes, probably not. We'll find out. You mentioned Frank Vetrano last night, by the way, and he went for like 30 fantasy points. So pay attention to what Paul has to say here during this segment. Could lead you to some DFS goodness. We've covered the forwards. Let's go to the defensemen. Who stand out?
Look, at the Leafs power play is only 1 for 9, and that goal was scored with a 2-man advantage. This is a top power play in the league, and it's run by Morgan Riley. He's only costing $5,400 tonight. I think it's a key that this group shows up, and if it does, Morgan Riley be a factor. That's a nice price tag to get there. I also like Justin Falk of the Blues, who comes in with 8 points in his last 10 games played, and he's ramped it up offensively in the entire second half of the season, averaging 3 shots on goal per game in that stretch. He'll be featured on their power play unit and costing only $4,600. So I'm looking at a couple of power play quarterbacks here that come in a little cheaper than I expected.
If you're trying to identify some good value tonight, it's normally when we're talking about the highest projected scorers, obviously you mentioned Connor McDavid, Austin Matthews, guys that are expected to really explode. You don't tend to see guys that are in that 5K range mixed in among the elite, which sets up, again, obviously a great value opportunity. Anze Kopitar is projected for right around 16 points tonight. He's a top line guy, top power play guy. Is he the one that you would identify, or is there somebody else?
Well, I'm a little worried about Los Angeles in this one. I think Edmonton is overdue for a big night, like I'm implying. So I'm going to go elsewhere and look at 3 other guys who might be in better circumstances. St. Louis, for instance, they're at home, and one of their snipers, Jordan Kyrou, has been on a long roll, and I expect that tear to continue. He's got 11 points in his last 10 games played, yet somehow still priced at only $4,600, despite the fact that he's also featured on their number 1 power play. And I mentioned the Leafs earlier. Their second line has been really quiet for the first 2 games of the series, but their left winger on that second line, Ilya Mikheyev, has been playing maybe the best of the 3 guys in that unit, and also on the special teams. He's been on power play and shorthanded situations. You can't sleep on the fact the Leafs are a threat even when they're shorthanded. They got a goal in each game so far. I look for him to continue his long run of consistent scoring tonight, costing only $4,200. And then finally, if the Bees are going to make their mark in this series against Carolina, they need to be competitive, and that begins with their first line. And look at Jake DeBrusk alongside Marchand and Bergeron there. A primo spot for him. He's been on a nice run, and he gets that thumb assignment while carrying only a $4,100 price tag.
Part of the beauty of the playoffs is we don't have that, day long or even, wait through the morning skate. Who's going to be the goalie tonight? For the most part, we have a pretty good idea of who's going to be in net. So do you have a favorite among tonight's games?
I do have one favorite, but it's a couple of guys to consider. We don't know who the goalie is going to be for St. Louis tonight. So Billy Husso and Jordan Binnington are both priced at $7,600. That's extremely low, Adam, for a goaltender who was expected to win tonight. I expect St. Louis to come out with the victory. So I encourage listeners to circle back to RotoWire's starting goalie grid. How about that for a promo?
Like that. Good plug.
Yeah, and I say go to RotoWire later today on the goalie grid. My buddy AJ Schultz working hard on that all day long. Get the right guy in your lineup, and you could receive for a pretty cheap win.
All right, Slater-proof pick for this segment here, Pauls. We're looking at it on the DraftKings Sportsbook side of things. You have a favorite NHL bet. Could be anything available to you.
Yeah, I've got a couple here. I look for Florida to assert themselves in Washington against the Caps. Tonight, they're a team without their top physical guy, Tom Wilson. That's a big loss for them. And part of their identity is lost with his inability to play tonight. The Panthers will have every opportunity to lean on their all-out attack without fear of him being roaming around. And that'll put even more pressure on the home side tonight. So I'd say take the Panthers on the puck line, -1.5 for a +130 payoff. And the only game that I note that I see there with a total goals of 5.5, which is very low in this high-scoring season of hockey that we're seeing. It features Carolina and Boston, and Carolina has met that mark on their own in the first 2 games with 5 tallies in each of those contests, and they rolled the Bruins 3 times in the regular season with a higher average. So I expect the Bees' offense to be as good as they can tonight, behind that top line, and they're facing Carolina's third-string goalie Pyotr Kochetkov in the nets tonight. So an added incentive to see more goals. I might even go to the alternate prop here, over 6.5 or better payoff.
Pablo, always great to see you. It's never often enough, my friend.
Same here, buddy. You take care.
All right. Enjoy the weekend. We're going to let Paul go. When we come back, we're going to be joined by a trifecta of guys, pretty much the second half of the show. It begins, though, with Jeff Ulrich and Pierce Dietrich. They're coming up for a little NASCAR talk. Stay tuned. NASCAR Goodyear 400 on the way, and who better to discuss that with than Pierce Dietrich and I guess also Jeff Ulrich. We'll find out. Adam Kaufman here with you. Thanks for being with us. Sweat continues on till about noon Eastern time, guys. We're going to get to NASCAR DFS Sportsbook as well, obviously. And let's take a look. Jeff, we'll let you go first here. Head-to-head between you two guys. Pierce has really been running the show at this point. The guys in the top price range, who is your favorite DFS pick over 10K?
Okay, well, the last week may have been a bit of a wash, but we're gonna make up for it this week. I think you got to go to Denny Hamlin here. It's been a little bit of a rocky season for Denny in a lot of ways. He's dealing with stuff off the track, so to speak, as we say in NASCAR as well. But he's coming to Darlington. I think he puts all that stuff behind him this week, and I think he pops off for a big race. He's won 4 times at this track. He's got an average finish of like 7th here over a bunch of races. So. I mean, we talk about horses for courses in golf, tracks for guys who drive cars here in NASCAR, and Denny Hamlin, this is his track. I really do think that you're getting him a little bit undervalued here as well, just because of the bad, the bad history, or just the bad recent form, we should say, in the finishing positions. But you look at what he's done at this event, and just overall, I mean, I think him coming in with a little bit of negative sentiment. I'll take the 10,300 on him. This hasn't been the greatest track for a guy like Chase Elliott either, who's coming off a win. Has been the better driver, but I think Denny Hamlin is where you start at over 10K.
Pierce, I got to say, tracks for guys who drive cars, it's not catchy.
Yeah, I don't know. There's really not much catchy in NASCAR, to be honest with you. We try to sell it as best as we can.
There you go.
And Jeff's doing a great job so far, but I'll go with Kyle Larson as the guy at Darlington. He was always good at Darlington throughout. I know I pick Kyle Larson every week, but that's because he is basically the Michael Jordan of NASCAR. He was last season. He continues to be. And if you fade him, you do so at your own peril. I know it didn't work out last week, but he spun out at Dover. He went down to 31st place. He was still able to rally and finish 6th at a track where you couldn't pass. It's just, again, another testament to how good of a race car driver he is. Last spring at Darlington, he had a speeding penalty at the end of stage 1, put him at the back of the field at a race where no one could pass anyone, and yet he still found a way to get back up to 2nd place by the end of the race. Last year, he had the best car. He just couldn't quite make the last move at the end of the race. He scored the most fantasy points. He's always been awesome at Darlington. Now that he's in a Hendrick car, he's even that much better. It's just, at this point, almost crazy to bet against Kyle Larson.
All right, let's drop down a bit salary-wise, Pierce, and stay with you. How about the 8 to 10K range?
Ross Chastain, years ago, a year ago, he was in the 6K range. Now he's almost $10,000. Most people see that and say, I don't believe it. It's Ross Chastain. Well, he has developed quickly or rapidly. He is a completely different driver. Maybe it's the new next-gen car. Maybe it's the leveling of the field with all of the new equipment that's being unrolled. Maybe it's all these different racetracks that they're at every single week. But the thing is, at all the different racetracks that they have been at, from dirt tracks to road courses, big ovals, small ovals, low wear, high wear, he's been good every single week. And he was good at Darlington last year. He was good at Dover last week. And the big kicker with Ross Chastain is his pit crew. It's the fastest. This is a track where it's hard to pass. If you want to gain spots, you should do it on pit road. And that's what he's been doing all season. Ross Chastain, he's going to go overlooked and underappreciated, but he is a top-tier driver now.
Jeff, give us someone in that 8 to 10K range, ideally someone who's not, dealing with something off the track.
Yeah, well, I think all these guys are dealing with stuff off the track. I mean, I know. Look, I don't know about if Ross Chastain is going to go like overlooked anymore. I mean, he's just like a kind of a top 5 machine. So I am with Pierce, unfortunately, on that one. I can't say anything there. Chris Bell is probably a good value at 8,300, but I'm going to go back to the guy who let me down big time last week, Joey Logano. This is a pretty good track for him. 3 top 10s in fairly recently. He's got just a good average, run position here as well. So I think Joey Logano is a driver too, who gets on, the social media and he took ownership for his troubles last week. And if you look at his results too, like he's had a couple bad races in a row this year, but what has he done? He's bounced back with good races. So I think 9,200, I think Logano is probably the guy who may get overlooked because people just don't want to just say, well, he's not driving well. I think that's not really the case. He just had a little bit of, weird things go wrong last week. This has been a good track for him at Darlington. 9,200. That to me, it looks like a guy in bigger fields. You should be getting back on here. And it wouldn't shock me at all if he produced the top 5 or something this week.
What's your favorite value play?
Yeah, I mean, I got a couple value plays here. I went deep this week. Okay, I'm bringing it. Eric Jones, 7,700. This guy, talk about tracks for guys who drive cars. Eric Jones, 6 top 10s, 3 top 5s, and a win in Darlington. This guy's been very, very good recently too. Like he's been in the mix, producing some pretty good DraftKings scores as well. 49 points last week, 54 the week before. Eric Jones at 7,700, definitely a driver. I was about to say player, a driver you're going to want to have an eye on. Then Justin Haley at 5,900. He's been in the mix lately too. You look at what he was doing last week, led for 19 laps. He was right in there. I think Justin Haley is a very good long shot bet too. And then I'm going to throw Kurt Busch as well. Another driver who just has a really good track record here. Kurt Busch at 7,300, another value, and perhaps like in like the matchups and the group betting, a driver you can take a look at on the DraftKings Sportsbook too.
Listen, these are athletes. This is their sport. I don't think we're offending them by calling them players, but yes, driver, proper designation. Pierce, value.
Yeah, I can get on board with Kurt Busch and Justin Haley, but do not play Eric Jones. Eric Jones accumulated those stats when he was racing for Joe Gibbs Racing, which is a top-tier team. He is now with Richard Petty Motorsports, and last year with Richard Petty Motorsports finished 32nd and 18th, I believe. So ignore the track history for Eric Jones. The guy I want to go with has good track history recently at this track, and that is Corey LaJoy at 4,900. He finished 15th last year in the grueling, challenging Southern 500. This is a high tire wear track, and guys that can manage their tires can do well, and we've seen Corey LaJoy do that. He also got a top 15 last week. He's trending in the right direction. 4,900, it's just way too cheap. This is a pricing error from my standpoint.
All right, unfortunately for Jeff anyway, Pierce is pretty much lapping him in the standings of our head-to-head. So this right here, Jeff, this is the pick that matters. We need the best DFS play for you at Darlington.
You know what? This is too tempting to do it. Pierce just spat on my guy. I'm going to take Eric Jones at 7,700. I don't think that matters at all. He's been driving well. Doesn't matter what team he's on. Joe Gibbs, Bill Belichick. I don't care. Taking Eric Jones, 7,700.
All right. Well, time to extend the lead here, Pierce. Who do you think?
No, I always feel like just not picking someone because this is going to get ugly, but the equipment does matter. It absolutely matters. It is not a fair sport. The team absolutely is a big deal. Eric Jones is a great race car driver. He is, but he's just not in the best equipment. I'll take the best race car driver in the best equipment, and it's Kyle Larson. And I've got to imagine by the end of this week, Jeff's going to be lapped. You just got to play, and there's just no reason not to take Kyle Larson and what he has done at Darlington in the past and what he continues to do every single week. There's just nothing that needs to be said.
Well, we're going to say a little bit more about Kyle Larson before we go here, Pierce, because he's plus 500, the favorite to win this thing. You got Martin Truex at plus 700. What are the odds that your favorite to win here on the DraftKings Sportsbook actually comes through?
There's a good shot, and even throwing in Denny Hamlin, who Jeff mentioned earlier. All three of those guys are very fast. They can get out front. It's a very hard track to pass, and they can win. But my concern would be that this is a shorter race. It's not as long. At the longer Southern 500, you usually get the best cars going to win. In this shorter race, I think it comes down to pit road, and someone's going to take the lead on pit road. It's a very challenging track to pass, especially during the day, and whoever does that's going to win. So the best pit stop at the end of this race. So basically, you'd be running in the top 5, have the best pit stop, and then you win. And I think that's going to be Ross Chastain. So I would take his odds. I think he's at plus 1,200, and Chastain's going to win this.
Jeff?
I mean, I am going to bet Denny Hamlin in all seriousness at plus 800, like Pierce said. A little bit worried about just him dealing with different pit crew and stuff like that. But I think that just his track record here, and I think he is the type of guy who will just put that all behind him. I do like for top 5 bets, though, Justin Haley and Eric Jones at plus 2,500 and plus 500. You hit on one of those guys, we're in the profit. Big odds. Take the top 5 there.
All right, well, the sad news is we're almost done, but the exciting news is that these two guys plus Reed Fowler are going to come back for our next and final segment to talk about, well, if it's a sport and we haven't talked about it, we're going to talk about it. It's on the way. Don't go anywhere. our sports potpourri. We are going to limit it to sports as much as there's other stuff like Doctor Strange or whatever I'd like to talk about. Reed Fowler coming on in and joining, a couple of holdovers here, Jeff Ulrich and Pierce Dietrich. So, guys, Pierce, I have to start with you here. We're going to continue on with racing, but this time it's not NASCAR, it's F1 hitting the States. What do you expect here? You know, do you have a winner in Miami?
I do. I'm going to go with Max Verstappen. He was my pick for the Saudi Arabian GP, and that was because he had won the Saudi Arabian GP the year before, but also because that street circuit resembled Azerbaijan or Baku, where he was really good in 2021 as well. A lot of the drivers are, almost all the drivers are saying that the Miami circuit is going to be very much like Azerbaijan. And so if Verstappen was good there, Verstappen won at Saudi Arabia. He won last week. He's already had 2 wins this season. It looks like Red Bull. This is a racetrack that's got 3 long straight stretches that's favored the Red Bull teams this season. So I would go with, probably Checo Perez also finishing second behind Verstappen.
Our technical director, Matt Cody, just thinks you're making up names at this point.
They're real.
How many times do you think you had to practice saying
Wait for the horse racing. That's where we get the fake names.
That's true. Well, hey, they have names. They may or may not respond to them, but they have names. They're just different. Okay, let's loop in you other two here because I know you've been glued, Reed especially, to the Wells Fargo. How about on the DraftKings Sportsbook, a live mid-second round bet or a bet going into the weekend that has your attention here, Mr. Fowler?
We talked about it yesterday, Koff, last night. Aaron Rye is someone that, Jeff and I were, vacillating on Wednesday evening, and we didn't pull the trigger at 80-1 plus 8,000, but now he's down to 25. I think he saw, like, the weather's going to be terrible this entire weekend. And guys like Rye and other players who've played over in Europe, maybe look at guys who've played well in the Open Championship, like Sergio. He's sticking around, but Aaron Rye is probably my favorite heading into the weekend.
What about you, Jeff?
Yeah, I think that's a good theme too. The weather's going to be terrible, and I would not go too far down the board here. A lot of the field, when the PGA events get like this, what do they give up? They give up, and we typically see a guy in front. Jason Day's out there right now, but it could be like a Dahmen, or it could be someone that goes off this afternoon. We just get a small group of front runners, and it becomes like a 4 or 5 man event. And that's what this is starting to feel like. Aaron Rye at plus 2,500 is definitely a good bet. But my favorite right now is Matthew Wolff plus 3,500. He's tied with Aaron Rye. You're telling me that Matthew Wolff is a worse golfer than Aaron Rye? No, I'm sorry. Matthew Wolff has not played well. His irons were absolutely lasers yesterday. If this course is going to play like a U.S. Open, well, Matthew Wolff does well in those conditions. I think you got to take the plus 3,500. Yeah, it could end up horribly for us, but those are just 2 good odds right now. He's 4 back. If he even just shoots 2 under par, he's going to be in there on the weekend. And this guy, absolutely, if he gets a sniff, will want to go after it. It's been such a bad season. I think you got to take those odds, plus 3,500. You can get plus 320 too, just to top 10 right now in Matthew Wolff.
Well, Matthew Wolff is a worse golfer than Aaron Rye right now. He is, objectively speaking.
Get out of here. We're doing USFL. Don't take a break.
All right. Well, that transitions us, I guess, to football. We're going to go back to Pierce. We had the NFL draft last week and weekend, but this time of year, Pierce, we do talk USFL. So is there a must roster for this weekend for you, DFS wise?
It's hard to have these must rosters because you don't even know who's going to be active from one week to the next. And we even had a guy last week who was ruled inactive, and then he ended up running for 100 yards, even though no one knew he was playing. So you got to be careful with these must plays. But if I was going to label anyone, it'd be Mark Thompson, who leads the league with over 300 yards rushing this season. Could be in the NFL if it wasn't for off the field injuries with the Florida Gators, and also having all kinds of other issues around his life. But then you've got Kyle Sloter, who's been a solid quarterback. He's getting plenty of volume. I know that's been Jeff's guy so far, and he's got a good. You can pair him with Johnny Dixon from Ohio State fame. They've been pretty steady and reliable. They're on the field every week. They're getting targets. They're getting volume. That's usually the best that you can hope for.
No one knew that back was playing, including apparently the opposing coaching staff. What do you think here, Jeff?
I think that one guy you can definitely sort of hang your hat on one thing you can hang your hat on is Jeff Fisher trying to run the ball. So Reggie Corbin, took 20 carries last week, probably going to get big volume this week unless he gets inactive and starts someone else, as Pierce mentioned. So that's kind of a guy I'd look to in DFS. But you know what I'm going to do, Kaufman? I'm literally just going to give people all the winners in USFL this week. We're going to go with the New Jersey Generals, the Michigan Panthers. The Generals are at minus 475. The Panthers are at minus 115. The Tampa Bay Bandits to give the Birmingham Stallions their first loss. Todd Haley's group, plus 155. Then we're going to take the New Orleans Breakers at minus 210. You throw all those together, Koff, you get a nice little parlay going. It's around plus 700 or bigger, plus 750. So there you go. Generals, Panthers, Bandits, Breakers. There's your 4 winners for the USFL this week.
I'd love to loop all 3 of you into this next one. Hopefully I can. It's Kentucky Derby weekend, guys. Yeah. You got to be excited about that, obviously. We've got a free-to-play pool here at DraftKings, $10,000 prize pool for the Derby. Which horse are you going to back tomorrow, Jeff? Keep the momentum.
Messier. You can't, there's a horse named after one of the Edmonton Oilers greats, and you're not going to, and I'm not going to bet it. The horse is named after Mark Messier. Of course we're betting it, but in all seriousness, the Stallion does have some speed and stamina. It's got the kind of profile that you want at Kentucky Derby, especially if it's going to be a little bit wet. If you're getting plus 800 on Messier, take that. But I'm going to give you a dark horse too, Koff. Barber Road at 30-1 or around plus 3,000. This dude, all he does is finish second. But guess what? He was purchased for $15,000. This is the underdog story of the Derby. Finally getting through, breaking through for that win. Give me Barber Road. That's my long shot for the Kentucky Derby.
Producer Drew said the only safer pick in Messier is Jeff picking Messier. Just inevitable. Oiler love. What about you here, Pierce?
I'm going to go with Cyberknife. I was attracted to the name, and then I found out that it's some sort of prosthetic, or it's a prostate laser cancer gun. So I don't know. It's not nearly as cool as I thought it was at first. But he did win the Arkansas Derby recently. And I guess his dad finished 3rd in the Kentucky Derby. So he's got pretty good lineage. And I don't know. Still, Cyberknife sounds pretty cool at 20-1.
Right out of T2. What about you, Reed?
Yeah, Cyberknife won the Florida Derby. That's a good correlation to the Kentucky Derby. But, I mean, come on. Barber Road and Messier, give me a break. Those horses aren't winning. Pole position does play a difference in this. But Epicenter, I know he's a heavy favorite. Joe Rosario, the jockey, he's in that 3rd pole position. It's not bad, but it's not great. Epicenter is fantastic. I think he won the Louisiana Derby. But I'm with Pierce here. I like Cyberknife and White Abario, both 15 and 16 in the pole position. White Abario, he's someone, too, that has a lot of pedigree coming into this. This should be fun. It might be a little bit money, though, in Kentucky.
When I hit the Barber Road Eric Jones parlay this week, I'm not even coming into work next week. So.
Free vacation, Jeff Ulrich.
You might not be asked to come back to work once those guys finish dead last.
Yeah, well, that's what you don't hear behind the scenes. If we can keep your answers to like 15 seconds for this last one, we'll wedge it in. Back to football, NFL draft looking ahead to 2023. On the DraftKings Sportsbook, you have C.J. Stroud at plus 400 to be the number 1 pick. We saw last year, obviously, how the favorite changed all throughout the year. So who's a long shot that you like right now, Reed?
Jalen Carter. He was arguably one of the best defenders on that Georgia defense. He's at plus 3,500. He's a D lineman. He probably will go like top 3, but he has a chance to get in the top 1. What
about you, Jeff?
I wouldn't go too far down the board. Spencer Rattler plus 2,000 is a name I'd throw out. But yeah, I mean, look, it's the 2023 draft. I mean, this is like, this is too far away, even for me.
A little too early for you. Pierce, any thoughts?
I need more time to talk about this. 15 seconds isn't enough, so I'll pass.
I like that.
I could give you a name, but without the explanation,
I didn't do my homework because it's beneath me. So I'll pass him my homework.
He was looking up Cyberknife. Give him a break.
Yeah. He's been studying film.
Pierce using what his students would use against him in the classroom.
Thanks to Drew, thanks to Cody, thanks to Howard, thanks to everybody involved with this show, all the people that have been on over the course of the last hour, including these 3 knuckleheads. We got the slate coming your way after the 4 o'clock Madden Sim, right around 5:15 on the DraftKings YouTube, Twitch, and Twitter pages. Make sure you tune in for that. A lot of baseball talk with a big slate on the horizon tonight. Steve Buchanan, Matt LaMarca will be on the way. I may drop by as well. I'm Adam Kaufman. We'll see you later. Enjoy the weekend.